Applehead, it's Kim Loves MJ because Kim loves MJ. This is my first video. This is my first video on my Michael Jackson channel, and I'm more than excited to interact with you and to share my thoughts with you today about a new podcast known as Michael Jackson, The Case for Innocence. Before we begin, I want to let you know I'm not affiliated with Cheryl or June, the mother-daughter duo involved in the creation of this podcast. So just to be clear, they're not telling me to make a review or anything like that. This is all just my opinion. I absolutely love this podcast and I cannot recommend it enough. Michael Jackson was accused of child molestation a number of times throughout his life. This podcast sets to make a claim for his innocence. So I love this podcast just from the first episode alone. By the way, June is the daughter and Cheryl's the mom. June had a very similar story to me in that when you become a fan of Michael, you just become one. You know what I mean? Like you just stumble upon his music and then from there it just grows and grows and grows into something awesome and amazing. So shortly after June became a fan, the Leaving Neverland documentary came out and it reignited the allegations that we were attempting to get Michael away from, because obviously he didn't do those, he was already acquitted. It really sent a lot of things downward, and so June's mom, Cheryl, took the time to research. Before that, Cheryl wasn't really a fan, but because her daughter was a big fan of Michael, or rather is a big fan, but I'm saying at the time, she wanted to be sure that the person that her daughter was identifying with, that it was going toward a person who was good and not somebody who was a child molester, So Cheryl goes on this whole expedition of research, and I have some notes here, that's why I keep looking down. Cheryl had said that she owes her daughter and Michael Jackson a fair look at the evidence. I thought that was gorgeous, that was beautiful. I empathize with June that I also was a victim of bullying because of being a Michael Jackson fan. Especially when I was in middle school and high school, it was like the worst time to be a Michael Jackson fan. The Leaving Neverland movie, I'm calling it a movie, not a documentary, because it's not a documentary. Documentaries are supposed to be factual. The Leaving Neverland movie came out when I was in high school. So even before that documentary came out, I was met with judgment and shame for being a Michael Jackson fan. I had people left and right because they knew me as the big Michael Jackson fan in the school. It was like every day I would have another person saying, oh, he bleached his skin, or he was a child molester. I think those are the ones that were I got those pretty often. And they would place all that judgment that they had about him onto me. My biggest memory that just haunts me to this day, I went to a church-based high school and we had religion class, right? There was this assignment that we had to do where this one student had to go to the board and write down people's answers, students' answers. And the teacher asked the question, what is something in your life or something that you love that represents love to you? Everyone was saying the same answer, friends and family, and we didn't have to respond or anything like that, but there were people that were mentioning music stars and everything like that. The girl writing on the board, she had wrote BTS because she absolutely loves BTS, She looked at me and she was like, oh yeah, Michael Jackson. So then she writes it for me, you know what I mean? So I was like, yeah. I was like, I hope I don't get anything bad from this. And from her perspective, she saw it as or at least from my interpretation, is that she knew that I was a big fan of somebody, just as she was a big fan of BTS. So she understood on that level of loving somebody and seeing them as a representation of love. And so people were listing all these people, music artists. Somebody said Frank Ocean. So then it came time for the teacher, once everyone finished their responses, for the teacher to say, so we're gonna cross out anything that doesn't really represent love. They went one by one on each bullet, right, of everything that was on the board. And then once they stopped at Michael Jackson, immediately everyone was like, oh no, he doesn't represent love at all. If anything, it shows that he loved kids. And so the whole classroom just started talking smack about him, just so openly, knowing that I was in the room, just going at it, going at it. The only thing I could do was just stay there frozen First of all, I didn't even put the answer there. But the whole classroom was just talking about him. Still hurts to think about, because when it came time for something that was personal about, you know, something that I loved and something that I cared for being brought out, all of a sudden there was all this judgment around me. I forgot to mention, the girl at the whiteboard defended me, and she was the only one to do that for me. Thank you so much, Melanie. You know, that wasn't the only time that classmates would also be really mean. So I 100% get June. Being a Michael Jackson fan is not for the weak. But ultimately, I think it comes down the reason why people are still so invested in Michael and still say that he's guilty and everything like that. It's because they're ignorant. And I know that people love to make fun of Michael saying, that's ignorant, you know. But it's true. Ignorance is prejudice, and ignorance causes judgment. People were placing judgment onto Michael without having done anything of research. I've only ever had like 2 people in my life, like, and I'm telling you, from everybody that I met in middle school, everyone that I met in high school, everyone that I met outside of it, I've only had like 2 people genuinely ask me, was Michael Jackson guilty? Like, everyone was just like, why do you like a child molester? You know what I mean? Like, they were like, I love people who are like, they, even if they don't know anything about Michael, they're still willing to learn. They're still willing to understand. They're still willing to get it, instead of just placing like, he's guilty, he's this and that, without looking at evidence. This is why I admire podcasts and things like this, you know what I mean? Like this podcast that I'm talking about today. I admire them so much because there's just too much, like way too much of wrongful evidence, of actually not even evidence, like just fabrication. You know what I mean? Like there is not evidence against Michael except for speculation. You know what I mean? That's all we have is speculation, you know? Well, not we. I don't adopt that, but you know, the guilters, you know, that's the only thing they have. They have, not me, not we. They make that clear. I really admire that there are people who take the time to do as much research as possible, and then they make something so beautifully crafted that is so readily accessible and available for people to listen. The podcast was just very well crafted. Like, you could tell that they really went into all the research. And all of the evidence checks out, you know, with multiple sources. Oh, by the way, speaking of which, I also like that they went through an unbiased search by also looking at the counter evidence, you know what I mean? Well, evidence, but the counter statements. In terms of speaking, they're very sure of themselves. Like, they are talking about these things. Because a lot of the times, whenever I hear somebody talking about, like, their opinion, they're like, I don't know. I don't know, you know, we'll never know, and like, you know, they have that kind of attitude, so it gives that uncertainty, you know, it it makes the listener go, am I supposed to be taking what they're saying seriously? For this situation, for this podcast, they're like, I'm telling you how it is, this is what happened, they said this, they said this doesn't match up, this doesn't match up. They're telling you straight up, this is how it is, you know. And I deeply admire that. Like, it brings certainty, you know what I mean? It invokes certainty in listeners, you know. It's a beautiful podcast and definitely worth a listen. I'm gonna make sure to put a link to their website, and I don't know if I have a way of linking their podcast, but I'm gonna do that as well. I also like that they brought up other sources that I was planning on mentioning in this video. I literally started listening to the podcast last night and then I finished this morning, and I was going to bring up these sources that I will also link in the description. Square One, I love that they brought up the Square One documentary. Pretty much it goes into the basis of the Jordy Chandler case. It's supposed to basically be like, this is the general framework of all the other allegations, and by countering this one, we're also countering the other ones because they also follow the same framework, the same skeleton, if you will. I will be sure to link that one down below. I think it's amazing. I also love that they brought up, I love this book so much, Michael Jackson Conspiracy by Aphrodite Jones. As far as I know, there is going to be an audio version of the book. However, I read the book in print. I will be sure to find some sort of link for that, whether it be Amazon or whatever. I'll put that in the description. They also mentioned My Friend Michael by Frank Cassio. Frank is able to like show you how like the mechanisms in which a friendship with Michael and a kid like worked through his actual example, because people, they don't get it. They just think of it as like a sexual thing, you know what I mean? That's the first thing they think, instead of like, maybe there is friendship there, you know? Yeah, I will find a link for that too. Might be Amazon. I deeply admire this podcast and I cannot wait for their next season. They just wrapped up season 1 and they're gonna go into more of the evidence and things like that and the allegations and everything in their next season, and I'm more than excited to listen. Pretty much the purpose of this video was to share the podcast and to recommend it to more people. So if you happen to be a Michael Jackson fan or you want to know more about Michael Jackson, please make sure to like and subscribe for more. I would absolutely appreciate it. Keep on walking, Applehead. Bye-bye.